The business trips were nothing new. Over the years, my husband, Daniel, had attended countless conferences and meetings, and I had always trusted him without question. But something about this trip felt different. His demeanor had changed. He was distracted, his phone constantly in his hand, and his explanations felt rehearsed. The night before his departure, I found myself staring at his packed suitcase. The clothes were perfectly folded, his itinerary neatly tucked in the side pocket. Yet, something gnawed at me, a small voice whispering that all was not as it seemed. "Are you okay?" he asked, noticing my quietness. His tone was warm, but his eyes held something I couldn't place. Guilt, perhaps? "I'm fine," I replied, forcing a smile. "Just tired." He kissed my forehead and promised to call as soon as he landed. I nodded, but as he walked away, a plan began to form in my mind. For the first time in our marriage, I wasn't content to sit idly by. The next morning, I called in sick at work, packed a small bag, and booked a ticket on the same flight as Daniel. I felt a mix of anxiety and determination as I boarded the plane, carefully avoiding his line of sight. He was seated in business class, engrossed in his laptop, oblivious to my presence a few rows behind him. Upon landing, I kept my distance, following him discreetly as he made his way to the hotel. He checked in smoothly, greeted warmly by the concierge. I, on the other hand, had to invent a last-minute story about surprising my husband to secure a room on the same floor. Once in my room, I paced nervously, debating whether I was being irrational. But then I saw him through the slightly ajar door of his suite, standing by the window, speaking animatedly on his phone. His words were muffled, but the tone was unmistakable. Soft, intimate. My heart sank. That evening, as the city outside buzzed with activity, I sat in my dimly lit hotel room, grappling with the decision to confront Daniel or to gather more evidence. My heart wavered between wanting to trust him and needing to know the truth. I decided to wait. Through the peephole, I saw Daniel leave his room. He was dressed impeccably, a hint of cologne lingering in the air as he passed by. My heart raced as I grabbed my coat and followed him, keeping a safe distance. He hailed a cab, and I quickly got into another, instructing the driver to follow. We arrived at an upscale restaurant, the kind of place reserved for special occasions. As Daniel entered, I saw him being greeted warmly by a woman, young, polished, and strikingly confident. They were seated at a private table near the back. I slipped inside, positioning myself at a discreet distance where I could observe without being noticed. The scene unfolded like a slow-motion nightmare. They laughed easily, their heads leaning closer as they spoke. She placed a hand on his arm, a gesture too intimate for colleagues. My chest tightened. Just when I thought I had seen enough, the waiter approached their table with a bottle of wine. Daniel smiled and handed the woman a small velvet box. My stomach churned. Was this a gift? Jewelry? Something even more incriminating? I left the restaurant before they could see me, the lump in my throat growing larger with every step. Back at the hotel, I tried to make sense of what I had witnessed. Who was she? Was she merely a business contact, or did their interaction suggest something deeper? I debated calling him, confronting him right then and there, but I stopped myself. If I wanted answers, I needed more than speculation. I needed the truth. Later that night, as I sat on the edge of my bed, my phone buzzed with a message from Daniel. "Long day. Miss you. See you soon." The casual tone of his text felt like a slap in the face. How could he pretend everything was fine? Was this just another layer of deception? Sleep evaded me that night, my mind replaying the events at the restaurant. My suspicion had grown into something more, a quiet resolve to uncover every secret he was hiding. The following morning, I watched as Daniel left the hotel again, his pace brisk, his expression focused. I followed him to a nearby conference center, where he joined a group of colleagues. Among them was the woman from last night. For a moment, I felt a glimmer of hope. Perhaps their relationship truly was professional, but as I watched her touch his arm, her laughter ringing louder than anyone else's, that hope quickly faded. Then, to my surprise, Daniel broke away from the group and stepped outside. I followed at a distance, overhearing snippets of his phone conversation. "Yes, it's all set for tonight. No, she doesn't suspect anything. This will be perfect." My heart dropped. Who was he talking to? And what didn't I suspect? The cryptic phone call haunted me as I trailed behind Daniel through the bustling city streets. His words, "She doesn't suspect anything," played on a loop in my mind, each repetition stoking the fire of my suspicions. Whatever he was planning, I was determined to find out. That evening, I followed Daniel to yet another upscale venue, a rooftop bar overlooking the glittering cityscape. The view was breathtaking, but my focus was on the scene unfolding before me. Daniel was already seated at a corner table, the mysterious woman by his side. This time, she wore a sleek black dress that clung to her figure, her hair styled meticulously. They were joined by a few others, all of whom appeared to be colleagues. For a brief moment, I thought I might have overreacted, that this was nothing more than a business gathering. But as the night wore on, it became clear that she commanded Daniel's attention in a way no one else did. She leaned closer, whispering something that made him laugh, a sound I hadn't heard in weeks. My chest tightened. Was this what I had feared all along? Had I lost him to her? Then came the moment that unraveled my fragile composure. The woman reached into her purse and pulled out the same small velvet box I had seen the night before. She opened it, revealing a delicate necklace with a sparkling pendant. Daniel smiled as she fastened it around her neck, his hands lingering a moment too long. I had seen enough. I'd left the bar in a haze of anger and heartbreak, my mind racing with questions. What did that necklace mean? Was it a gift of love? A token of betrayal? The city lights blurred as tears welled in my eyes, but one thing was clear. I couldn't let this go unanswered. Back at the hotel, I paced the room waiting for Daniel to return. Every second felt like an eternity, my emotions swinging wildly between fury and despair. When I finally heard his keycard beep at the door, my heart pounded in my chest. He stepped inside, his face lighting up with surprise when he saw me. "Emily? What are you doing here?" "I could ask you the same thing," I said, my voice trembling but firm. "But I already know. I've seen everything, Daniel. Everything." His expression faltered, confusion giving way to alarm. "What are you talking about?" "The woman," I snapped. "The necklace. The lies. Do you think I wouldn't notice? Do you think I wouldn't follow you?" Daniel's eyes widened, and for a moment he seemed at a loss for words. Then he sighed, running a hand through his hair. "Emily, it's not what you think." "Don't you dare say that," I said, my voice rising. "I've seen enough to know that you've been hiding something from me." "Okay," he said, his tone shifting to one of calm resolve. "Let me explain." I folded my arms, glaring at him. "I'm listening." He hesitated, then said, "Her name is Vanessa. She's not just a colleague. She's the daughter of one of our biggest clients." "The necklace?" "It was a gift from her father." I didn't buy it. His explanation sounded plausible, but it didn't ease the knot in my stomach. "And the way she looks at you? The way you let her touch you? That's just business too?" Daniel sighed. "Vanessa is complicated. She's been overly friendly, yes, but I've kept it professional. I didn't want to tell you because I knew how it would look." "Professional?" I repeated bitterly. "Is that what you call secret dinners and private conversations?" "Emily," he said, stepping closer, "I swear to you, nothing inappropriate has happened. I would never betray you." His words hung in the air, but I couldn't shake the feeling that there was more to the story. "If that's true, why didn't you tell me from the beginning? Why hide it?" "I didn't want to worry you," he said, his voice soft. "You've always been so supportive of my work, and I didn't want this to create unnecessary tension." "Unnecessary tension?" I echoed, my voice breaking. Daniel, do you have any idea what this has done to me? Following you, seeing the way she acts around you, it's been torture. He reached for my hand, but I pulled away. I understand, he said quietly, and I'll do whatever it takes to make this right. But you have to believe me, Emily. You're the only woman I love. I wanted to believe him, I truly did, but trust doesn't rebuild itself overnight. That night, I lay awake, replaying his words and actions in my mind. Was Vanessa really just a client's daughter, or was there something deeper he wasn't telling me? The following day, I decided to do my own digging. If Daniel wouldn't give me the whole truth, I would find it myself. The next morning, I woke with a renewed sense of determination. If Daniel was telling the truth, I needed to see it for myself. If he wasn't, I needed proof. I waited until he left for his meetings, then called the hotel concierge to ask about Vanessa. Posing as a potential business client, I inquired if she was staying at the hotel and quickly learned she had a suite on the same floor. It felt like a confirmation of my worst fears. That afternoon, I followed Daniel to a conference session. As I observed from the back of the room, Vanessa approached him during a break, placing a hand on his arm as she whispered something in his ear. He nodded, his face serious, and they exited together through a side door. I felt a pang of betrayal but stayed composed, determined to uncover the truth. I followed at a distance, eventually finding them in a private lounge. They sat close, their conversation animated but too low for me to hear. My hands trembled as I took out my phone, snapping a photo through the glass doors. Evidence, I thought grimly. When they finally left, I saw Daniel place his hand lightly on Vanessa's back, a gesture that could be innocent, but in my eyes, felt far too familiar. I decided to take a bold step. That evening, I waited until Vanessa returned to her suite and knocked on her door. She opened it, surprise flashing across her face when she saw me. "Can I help you?" she asked, her tone cool and professional. "Yes," I said, stepping inside without waiting for an invitation. "I want to know the truth about you and Daniel." Her composure faltered for a moment, but she quickly recovered. "I don't know what you're implying." "Don't play coy," I snapped, my voice trembling with anger. "I've seen the way you act around him. The dinners, the necklace, the whispers. If you think I'm going to stand by while you wreck my marriage, think again." Vanessa crossed her arms, her expression unreadable. "You're mistaken," she said evenly. "Daniel and I have a strictly professional relationship." I scoffed. "Professional? Is that what you call the way you drape yourself over him?" Her eyes narrowed, and for the first time I saw a flicker of guilt. "Fine," she said after a moment. "I won't deny that I've been interested in him. But nothing has happened. Daniel is loyal to you, even if you don't believe it." Her admission hit me like a punch to the gut. I wanted to lash out, to scream, but her next words stopped me cold. "I was testing him," she said quietly, "to see if he'd stray, and he didn't. If you have any doubt about his loyalty, that's on you, not him." I left her room in a daze, my mind racing. Was Vanessa telling the truth? Had Daniel passed her test, or was this just another manipulation? Either way, it was clear that my trust issues had brought us to this point. When I returned to my room, Daniel was waiting for me, his face a mask of concern. "Where were you?" he asked. "I spoke to Vanessa," I said bluntly, watching his reaction. His jaw tightened. "You did what?" "She told me everything," I continued, ignoring his anger. "About how she tried to tempt you. About how you didn't take the bait." Daniel exhaled sharply, running a hand through his hair. "Emily, I didn't want to drag you into this. Vanessa's father is one of our biggest clients, and she has a reputation for this kind of behavior. I didn't engage with her, but I couldn't afford to offend her either." "And you didn't think to tell me?" I asked, my voice breaking. "Do you have any idea what I've been through these past few days?" "I know," he said, his eyes pleading, "and I'm sorry. I was trying to protect you, but I see now that I only made things worse." We sat in silence for a long time, the weight of the past few days pressing down on us. Finally, Daniel reached for my hand. "I love you, Emily," he said. "I've made mistakes, but I've never stopped loving you. I need you to believe that." I searched his face, looking for any sign of deceit. All I saw was sincerity and regret. Slowly, I nodded. "I believe you," I said. "But this can't happen again, Daniel. If we're going to move forward, we need to rebuild trust. Together." "Anything," he promised. "I'll do whatever it takes." The morning after my confrontation with Vanessa, I woke to find Daniel sitting at the small table in our hotel room, a notebook open in front of him. He was scribbling something, his brow furrowed in concentration. The sight of him, so deeply engrossed, stirred a mix of emotions in me: love, anger, hope, and fear. "Morning," he said softly when he noticed me awake. "Morning," I replied, my voice cautious. "I've been thinking about what you said," he began, gesturing toward the notebook. "About rebuilding trust. I want to start by being completely transparent. No more secrets." Daniel spent the next hour going over every detail of the past few days. He explained his interactions with Vanessa, how he had tried to manage her advances without jeopardizing the business deal. He admitted that he had been afraid to tell me, not because he had done anything wrong, but because he didn't want to cause me unnecessary worry. "It was a mistake," he said, his voice heavy with regret. "I see that now. I should have trusted you enough to tell you the truth from the start." His honesty was disarming. For the first time in days, I felt a glimmer of the man I had fallen in love with, the man who had always been my rock. "I appreciate your honesty, Daniel," I said. "But trust isn't just about words. It's about actions." He nodded. "I know. And I'm ready to prove it to you." Later that day, Daniel invited me to join him at his conference meetings. "I want you to see what I do," he said. "No more feeling left out." I agreed, and as I observed him in his element, confident, charismatic, and professional, I began to see him through new eyes. This was the man I had married, the man who had always worked tirelessly to provide for our family. When Vanessa approached him during a break, I stiffened, bracing myself for another tense interaction. But to my surprise, Daniel kept his distance, his body language firm and professional. He introduced me with pride, his hand resting lightly on my back as he said, "This is my wife, Emily." Vanessa's expression flickered with something, perhaps embarrassment or defeat, but she quickly recovered, offering a polite smile. "It's nice to meet you," she said. That evening, as we returned to our hotel room, I felt a weight lift from my shoulders. "Thank you," I said, breaking the silence. "For what?" Daniel asked. "For showing me that I can trust you." He stopped walking and turned to face me, his expression earnest. "Emily, I never want you to doubt me again. You're my everything." Tears welled in my eyes as I nodded. "I believe you, Daniel. But rebuilding trust takes time. We have to work on this together." "And we will," he promised. Over the next few weeks, Daniel and I began to rebuild our relationship, piece by piece. We attended couples therapy, where we learned to communicate more openly and honestly. I worked on expressing my feelings without letting my fears consume me, while Daniel focused on being more present and transparent. There were setbacks, moments when old doubts resurfaced, but each time we faced them together, determined to move forward. Months later, as we celebrated our anniversary, I reflected on how far we had come. The betrayal I had once feared no longer cast its shadow over us. Instead, we stood stronger than before, our love tempered by the challenges we had faced. As we raised our glasses in a toast, Daniel took my hand and said, "Thank you for believing in us, Emily. I'll spend the rest of my life making sure you never regret it." His words filled me with a warmth I hadn't felt in a long time, and I'll spend the rest of mine doing the same. Looking back, I realized that our struggles had taught us valuable lessons about love, trust, and forgiveness. We weren't perfect, but we were committed, and that made all the difference. As we walked hand in hand into the future, I knew one thing for certain. Whatever challenges lay ahead, we would face them together.